Welcome everyone to today's webinar hosted by Form 1. Today we are talking about audience research. A few housekeeping mentions before we get started. You're welcome to join the conversation through the questions panel, and that's on the right-hand side of the screen, as well as through Twitter. Our handle is @Form1, and questions or comments can be left at the hashtag Form1. Also, for those of you who are maybe a little bit less familiar with Form 1, we are a full-service digital agency, and we work with mission-driven organizations. So those would include nonprofits, foundations, government agencies, and we work with them to help them extend their influence in the areas that they care about most. If you'd like to learn more about Form 1, you're welcome to check us out at form1.com. And with that, we're going to move directly into our presentation. And so I'm going to pass the baton over to our experts, Courtney, Christina, and Valerie, who will introduce themselves.
Great, thanks, Tina. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'll be your host today. My name is Courtney Clark. I'm the Managing Director of User Experience at Form 1, and I'm really excited to talk about audience research today. Joining me, I have two lovely co-presenters. Christina, say hello.
Hey everybody, my name is Christina Bjorn and I am on the UX team here at Forum 1 with Courtney. I'm a senior user experience designer and I work out of the Seattle office.
Excellent. And then we also have Valerie Miller. Hi, Valerie.
Hi, Courtney. Hi, Christina. Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Miller. I'm with United Way Worldwide at their headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. And I work as the content curator for United Way Online, which is a global intranet serving about 12,000 staff around the country and the world.
Excellent. So we tried to put a panel together that has a mix of experience, not only consultants, but also folks like Valerie who are in-house doing this work and have a ton of lessons learned to share. And that's the scoop today. We've got a lot to cover. We've got a couple case studies. We're going to couple a couple of methods that we often use, and then 8 key steps to the research that we do. And we'll also have time for questions at the end, but feel free to plug those into the chat at any point. So let's get started. So Erica Hall, you may know her. She works at Mule Design. She wrote a book called Just Enough Research. Great book, totally recommend it. I run across this tweet every once in a while. It sort of like resurfaces and people are talking about it. It's from a while ago, from 2014, but she said, anyone hostile to research is probably benefiting from ignorance. When I saw this, I felt her pain. I laughed and I was thinking, oh, yep, I've definitely encountered some people who are it felt kind of hostile toward audience research. But after thinking about it for a little bit, I realized that there are a lot of factors that can make people sort of hesitant to jump into audience research. And some of them may sound a little familiar to all of you. I've encountered a lot of folks who are just a team of one. And so they're thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds like a lot of work. How can I get this done all by myself? I've also encountered a lot of folks who just don't have the budget. They're like, I don't have the two-way mirror room where I can observe users. I can't spend that much. And then I've also chatted with folks who just don't have the buy-in internally. You are the people we're talking to today. I've given tons of talks on user experience best practices and how we get our work done. And this is the question that comes up all the time. I'm a team of one. I don't have budget. How can I get this done? So we're here to give some tips to you. I want to let you know, though, there aren't silver bullets, though, if you don't have time or if you don't feel like you need the research. That's a whole nother talk. A lot of the solutions that we're talking about today will require your time. If you don't have the money, then we're hoping that you have the time to commit to some of this. And we'll talk about time ranges in there as well. All right, first part, we're going to talk about audience research methods. So we're going to start with sort of the simpler type of research and get into the more complex. So first off is just simple observation, or sometimes called online listening or digital listening. What this is it's where you're going on, where your users are, whether it's on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, maybe online communities or other forums, and you're observing. You are understanding where they might have pain points. You're observing their behavior, the common questions that they have, or keywords that they're using when they are talking just amongst themselves. Christina, you have done this before. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach online observation, or tips you would give people who are just starting this and aren't sure where to go?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest pitfall here is, I mean, it's so easy to go down a huge rabbit hole. Let's say you've identified your audience type. Let's say, for the sake of example here, millennials, and very like 18 to 22 and interested in joining the Peace Corps, or something very specific. You've identified your group and you've discovered where they're communicating online. It's so easy to get distracted. And just go down chase various carrots. So really establishing a goal, like I want to know how people are thinking about joining the Peace Corps between 18 and 22, for example. Having that specific focus keeps things a lot easier, I guess, because I've definitely worked my way down a few holes. But then also, don't limit yourself to just the channels that you're comfortable with, because I found myself doing this as well. It's like, okay, I'm not necessarily super active on, let's say, Snapchat, but let's say my audiences are. I need to get out of my comfort zone and just figure out where it is they're actually communicating with each other. And if they're out there using Ello or Mastodon or some obscure social network, get out there and figure it out, because that's the only way you're going to be able to pay attention.
Excellent. And I think my favorite part of just doing simple observation is better understanding the keywords or the language that your audiences are using. That's a really good place to start. Excellent. So let's keep plugging away. The next method we have is conducting a survey. So this is great if you're trying to measure product performance. It's good if you want to do more quantitative information or research, if you're looking to get demographic information, if you're really trying to understand who your audiences are and what's driving them, and potentially like their satisfaction levels. Surveys are not great if you're trying to understand why they do certain things. I definitely don't recommend creating a survey that's over 15 questions, and definitely not all open-ended questions. You just won't get people to fill it out. It's a lot of work. Tools that we often use, we use SurveyMonkey. Typeform is a little bit newer, but it's very snazzy and interactive. I'm a big fan of that. And then Google Forms, the tried and true, and all your results get plugged into a nice spreadsheet at the end of it, which is really great. And the thing that's tempting with surveys, and I see this a lot, is there's a tendency for us to want to say, like, okay, what should we build? Or which feature will you use if we add it? Or what are the features you like the most? I like this quote from Steve Jobs. He says, a lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And I've definitely experienced this. It's been a big lesson learned where maybe there was a question about features, and what'll happen, and I've seen this happen over and over again, is people will say, yeah, of course I want that feature, and they'll just click all the boxes, they want all of them. I've seen organizations then build that, and then nobody uses it. So while people are good at answering questions about themselves and who they are and what drives them, they are not great at predicting what they'll want in the future. And Valerie, you've conducted surveys. What insights have you gained around surveys that you've conducted?
Well, Courtney, I really like your emphasis on when to use a survey and when not to use a survey, because that's definitely played a role in the work that I've done here, and that understanding the survey will give you a certain type of information versus a usability test will give you a different type of information, and interviews will give you other types of information. And so we've done surveys. We do an annual survey here with the organization that asks people not about their behavior, but more about how satisfied they are with different tools that are being offered. And then we also ask them to describe themselves along different metrics. So that's how we use surveys here.
That's great. And it gives you the numbers, so you have a sense of how many people in your audience are within a certain location, or how often they're online, or what devices they're using. Those are all great survey questions. And like you said, it leads really nicely. We often conduct a survey and then we jump to interviews, because in the survey you're understanding who they are and the sort of the what, and the interviews start to help you understand the why. So because in an interview you're able to sit down with somebody either on the phone, maybe you're in person, you're able to ask those more open-ended questions. And that's actually, I highly recommend that, because you can start to understand maybe the process that folks go through, the beliefs that they hold, or what are some of their main needs that they're working with. And like I said, we conduct these in person and via phone or video chat. The other thing that we find really useful is a lot of organizations have an annual conference or maybe a monthly meeting. We like to piggyback on those, because if potentially all your audience members are in one place. So it's a great spot to grab 15 minutes from them and conduct a quick interview. The other tip about interviews are so juicy. I love doing them. They're one of my favorite research methods to use. I like open-ended questions, but a really great question should elicit a story. So instead of asking people like, what is your job and what do you do? I often like to phrase it a little differently and say, when you're at a dinner party, how do you explain your job to somebody who doesn't know your organization? And that's when they're really able to boil it down. They can think of a specific time and they'll talk through that. Another great question is, tell me about the worst experience you've had with X, maybe related to the product that you're investigating as well. You could also ask them about the best experience. I've gotten so many great stories from folks around that. And then finally, one of my favorite questions to ask at the end of an interview is, I say, great, we've covered a lot of ground here. You've given a lot of great input. If you could change one thing, or if there's one thing you'd love for me to take away from this, what would it be? People are really able to prioritize when you phrase it like that. And I've gotten great responses there. Christina, you're a pro at interviewing users and audiences. What are questions you often use, or other tips you would give here?
Yeah, two of my favorites, I was just thinking about this last night, like two of my favorite questions that I know I just ask over and over again. One of like, what makes you look super good to your boss, right? This works only on certain types of research goals once you've established them, of course, especially if your interviewee is also like one of your project stakeholders. That's really great. But it can just really help you understand what success looks like for these folks. Let's see, another good one is, hey, how would you explain your organization and your mission and your goals to a 5-year-old? Because what ends up happening there is you really get to the deep, meaty understanding of how they fundamentally see their work and their organization, which can help you understand better and communicate that to others. But in general, just trying to avoid yes and no questions, because you don't want to just stop the conversation. Treating these interviews more like a conversation is just super, super helpful, because it makes folks more comfortable and gets you the juicy answers.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like that. Explain it to a 5-year-old. Yeah, so definitely we want to ask, like, what's your least favorite part, or keep it open-ended. Again, don't ask what features you should build. You're not going to get, they'll answer, they'll tell you, but it doesn't guarantee that they'll use them. It doesn't guarantee anything in the future. People really struggle to identify what they want out of a product. So let's talk about a case study. As Valerie said, she's at United Way. And Valerie, you have done tons of audience research, but I wanted to talk about interviews for a second. What prompted you to conduct interviews at United Way, and how did you decide that that was the best method?
Sure. Well, when I first came on, which was a year ago, almost to the day now, I was brought on to organize content, make content discoverable on the intranet. And I quickly realized that there were bigger problems going on in terms of understanding what the site was meant to do. And so one of the first things that I did was conduct stakeholder interviews around the organization. So I talked to the content providers, I talked to the people who had built the site, who were initially commissioned to create the intranet. And I chose interviews as a way of connecting with people, getting the information, getting the background, the history, trying to understand the goals and objectives of the site. And that was really key to launching the work for me.
Great. And so here, it looks like you conducted about 24 interviews, and you were mostly chatting with internal stakeholders and people who were creating the content for the intranet, right?
Yes, and I think the information that we came up with at that point was so compelling that we were able to then bring you guys on board to do additional audience research. Because I started out, just identifying some needs that weren't really a part of my job description. There's certain information we needed from the audience. So I did stakeholder interviews. Then to get the audience voice, I did usability testing. And what I've learned since then, and some of this you've touched on already, and I said it before, I'll say it again, I love the distinctions that you draw out between the different tools and when to use them. So when I wanted to get the voice of the network, I did usability testing, and we'll talk a little bit about that down the road. But what I really should have been doing was more audience research to get their voice along the lines of interviews. So I've kept that usability testing in one pocket and been able to use it since then. But with the work and the data that we gathered, I was able to get us to the point of doing more audience research.
Great. So it was really a catalyst. You started with these interviews, and that helped inform the size and the scope of the issue you were challenged with. But also, you talk to a lot of folks, so you're really understanding the dynamics between stakeholders, even within the organization.
Yes, and that's a really powerful position to be in when you have that information and that data in your pocket, and particularly when you augment that with the user information and their experience.
That's right. I like how you say in your pocket, because that's what a lot of this audience research does, is it gives you that evidence or the feedback to make a decision to go forward. That's a key part of it. So Valerie mentioned usability testing, and that's the next tactic or method that we really love to use. Usability testing is great. This is when you're sitting somebody down in your audience and you are asking them to complete a series of tasks on your product, whether it's an app, on mobile, on desktop, a website. It could be a number of things. But what you're doing is you're not saying, oh, hey, do you like this? What's your favorite part? You're asking them to complete tasks. You're saying, how would you do X? Where would you go to find X? Because what you want to see is, can they use the thing? So this usability testing is best to optimize something that you've created. It helps reduce risk because you're identifying key problems, but maybe before you launch or before it gets too far down the line. Ultimately, you are improving usability. This is telling you what people actually do. We often use usertesting.com, which is unmoderated, so it means that we're using the tool and we can plug in the tasks, and then it goes to a set of users and they do the test without us there, but we get the results. We also love to do moderated testing, either in person or via a screen share where somebody's sharing their screen. Both are really useful. Again, like at conferences, at meetups, these are great places where you can grab people and say, hey, could you do a couple of tasks here? I'd love to see how you complete different things. We really want to optimize this product. And a common question with groups that we work with is, okay, how many people do we need? We need 100, right? And the answer is, no, you don't need 100. You could do 100, but research has shown you need about 5 people to conduct a test with, and you're going to get the return on investment will be about the same until you reach the threshold of 20 people. So the Nielsen-Norman Group, really great resource, nngroup.com. They have done research on this, but they have figured out, like, what is the ROI on testing, doing usability testing, and how many people do you actually need before it makes a larger difference? Their advice, which is what we follow, is test 5 people, run a small test. You're going to identify the top 5 themes out of that, and then make adjustments and do another batch of tests. So sometimes we'll have groups come to us and say, like, no, we have to test 20 people. My response is, okay, we can test 20, but let's break them into batches. Let's see what we find. Because from 10 years doing this, you can start to identify themes at about the 3rd person. And that sounds crazy, but what's happening is when you're doing the usability testing, it's like somebody walking into a room. You're gonna find, like, they're gonna trip over the rug. You need to fix the rug before they can find other issues in the room. So you're gonna identify really major themes there. I also wanted to talk a little bit about recruitment for usability testing. Usability testing is a little bit more intensive than, say, a survey or an interview, because you're actually observing them and watching them click through. Our advice, a lot of it is just getting folks to show up. People are typically eager, but people are also very busy. Their days are packed. So while we say test 5 people, our advice is also make sure to book a couple extra. You're going to have a few no-shows. And then to make sure that people remember and have the right information, be sure to send that reminder email the day before. And so Valerie mentioned we've been doing audience research on United Way Online audiences, and Valerie did all the recruitment. Valerie, what advice do you have to folks who are just doing this for the first time?
Well, we have a very friendly network of people, and so I fully expected to get a high turnout for our invitations, but even still, the ratio is probably 1/4 of the people that we invited were able to take the time to participate. So I would say plan for that, and definitely be willing to send follow-up emails. For us, we had to consider time zone differences and sometimes language barriers. So just plan ahead for those kinds of things.
Great. Valerie did a great job recruiting. We had a good turnout, but it's certainly, there's legwork involved. There's the initial push to get those folks, and then that follow-up is really key. So I wanted to talk about another case study. Christina was the user experience lead on this project, and she conducted usability testing. So Christina, tell us, what was the project and what prompted the research?
Yeah, and so this is an ongoing project, so it's always top of mind for me. Quick summary, so Washington All-Payer Claims Database, just summary of what this thing is at its core. When the tool is done, it's going to be a way for anybody shopping for healthcare in Washington State to find the approximate price of whatever medical thing they need done to them. So like a checkup or spinal surgery, the whole spectrum. So we set out to build this from scratch. We knew immediately we're going to have some serious research, because other states have tried this, and the community of these APCD experts, there are a lot of subject matter experts out there, they all agree that no one's really done it well. So we really wanted to see where these tools had gone wrong. And, you know, some of them looked fantastic even, and they just weren't being used. So luckily, they were all still publicly available. So why not just run some usability tests on the existing sites? It was kind of the perfect solution. So of course, we didn't have a huge budget for this necessarily, so I kind of went a little rogue. I took my laptop to some meetups, packed up some cash to pay for some beer as lures, and just asked various people for their time during the meetups. Used the other APCDs as testing grounds, and just broke out my laptop, watched folks struggle to use them, told them to talk through their experience, and immediately identified a bunch of themes. The one that became immediately obvious, like, oh, this is going to be a big problem, was language. Jargon was one of the biggest barriers. And sure enough, and again, I'm still working on this, it continues to be at the center of pretty much every design decision, discussion and fight. So it was incredibly useful.
That's great. So because you're working on a product that's not fully built, you're still in discovery design, early stages, you actually used comparators to test, to learn from the issues that they had with their sites, actually.
Exactly, because why even take a stab at, you know, paper prototyping? So just making the website on paper and testing that when we had fully existing things to test. It was kind of perfect.
That's great. And tell us about the beer. How do I get a beer for doing a test?
Oh, well, Courtney, you got to come up to Seattle first. But the beer, actually, it loosened people up. It made them more likely to, and this sounds like I'm, luring people and poisoning them, but it really opened them up, and it allowed it was kind of a breach of like, here's like, hey, we're friends now. Talk me through this website. It just really loosened them up and got them more comfortable with talking through tasks, because that's always a pain in the neck, getting people comfortable with thinking out loud when they're trying to use a website.
Right. And you were in a casual setting too. You were at meetups and where people were networking and chatting already. So that
exactly, ambushing them, if you will.
Well, that's really great. And so the findings helped inform not only the designs, but also the strategy and how you were going to tackle this challenging issue around language.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's at the center of pretty much everything.
Great. Great. Rogue. I like it. So we talked about a couple of different methods, but there are many more out there. There are many, many more. And again, I'll mention the Nielsen-Norman group. They've plotted many different methods on this sort of grid that you're seeing here. I've created a very simplified version, but this can help you find what method is best for you based on the questions that you're looking to answer. All right, so let's talk about the actual process. What are the steps you need to go through when you are doing any of these, really? So we've broken it down to about 8 steps. This is from the very beginning when you're like, oh, I think I would like to do audience research, all the way to the end when you're presenting to your boss or to your stakeholders or to your clients and you're saying, this is what we have found. Behold, behold. Okay, so from the very beginning, probably even before you talk to many people, you need to think to yourself, what does success look like? What's driving this research? You need to set some goals for yourself, because you could go down many rabbit holes. I think that Christina talked about in the observation method that it's easy to get distracted. There are going to be many shiny objects that attract your attention. You need to get some laser-like focus on how you know when you'll be done and whether or not you're successful. So this is pretty easy. All you have to do is jot it down, but it's a great starting place.
Well, Courtney, and I can just jump in real fast with you say it's easy, but it's also at times some of the hardest things to do to get your stakeholders to agree on like a final goal.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, but I often find that having a draft version of this for people to reflect on is a great way to start. If you stand up to an open whiteboard with a room of people, that's really hard. People are much better at reacting.
Definitely.
Number 2, form a hypothesis. So another way to put this is, what hunches do you have going in? What, how's this, what are you looking at testing or seeing if it's true or not? And I have an example here where an example hypothesis could be, we believe that people don't even see the donate button and therefore they never select it. So this is the thing you're going to test against. Again, this is setting up some guardrails and giving you some guidance to make sure that you have a clear vision of the question that you're trying to answer with this research. Next up, pick the method. We've covered a couple here, and there are some key questions to answer. Are you really looking for qualitative or quantitative information? Are you looking for the what or the why? What are you exactly wanting to do? Do you want to explore and have it be very open-ended, or are you looking to optimize a product specifically? So hopefully you can use the bullet points we've provided so far to guide you in that realm.
And Courtney, if I can just add to that, I think the method is very important. I feel like these tools have been so critical to the work that we've been doing, not just in moving forward through the next steps and getting to the presentation, but also, you know, you can turn the information back toward goals and hypotheses when, as Christina mentioned, you're talking to stakeholders who don't necessarily know what the goals are. So these methods can help inform those types of decisions. So when you're defining success, which is so critical for any type of huge project that you take on, I think these tools become super valuable. So it's not just like, can you do them? Yes, anyone can do them. You can get started, but you also have to do them because you need this information to guide your work.
That's right. And people are going to get so excited about your audience research that they're going to ask you a million questions, and you need to have the goals and hypothesis and the reasoning for the method figured out so that when they say, well, why didn't you test this section? You can say, no, we were actually looking at the donate section specifically, and here's why. Next up, you are going to write a script. The goal is to be as prepared as possible before you get in front of an actual person or a user. You don't need a script for observation because you're just observing and you're not talking to anyone exactly. But for all the other methods that we've covered, you need to be prepared and have a guide. So if you get nervous, if you get off track, the script will help guide you through that. And the example outline that we often follow is right there below. There's a quick introduction and a welcome. Again, you want to talk about the purpose of the research, and that's simple. It could be like, we really value our customers' feedback. We're looking to hear from you about X, Y, and Z, and that's why we're here today. Also, it's helpful to talk about how the results will be used. Even if you say, you know, we're just looking to get some questions answered, or we're eager to improve this product, and first we need to talk to you folks. Then you have the questions, and finally the conclusion. Next up is practice. This is sort of like 4.5. The script is great, but talking through the script is even better. Going through it once with somebody sitting next to you is going to help you refine your questions so it feels more natural. You should also be setting up the screen share and practicing that, making sure that your audio is working, making sure that your internet connection's solid. It's really simple stuff that you can troubleshoot early if you practice. So work out those kinks early. Next up, find some people. So you have your goal, your hypothesis, you've got your script. And now what we need are the audience folks. We have a couple places that we recommend starting if you're like, okay, I kind of know who my audience is, but I have no idea where to find them. We often look at existing email lists. So if your organization, if there's a newsletter or any sort of email list, that's a great place to start. Social media, you can check out who are your Facebook followers, your Twitter followers. Even on LinkedIn, you can see areas that people are interested in. Maybe you have connections with them already. Great place to start. You can do what Christina did. She went to meetups. Depending on the audience that you're targeting, you know, these days there's a meetup for everything. So that's a good option. Many organizations have yearly conferences or, like I said, monthly meetups. That's the best, because often conferences can be quite large. So you could even do a couple of rounds of testing or interviews at a conference itself. And then finally, if you're really, really struggling, friends, relatives, even just chatting with folks in coffee shops, those are great places to start. It's actually a really great place to practice as well. The goal is to go out and talk to people and get feedback from somebody who isn't within your own organization. All right, it's time. You're going to actually conduct the research. This could take a while. Usually, like for a survey, we'll leave it open for a week or two. For usability testing, usually we try to get everyone scheduled within a single week. Sometimes it takes 2. Same with interviews. This can be kind of tricky because you're working within other people's schedules, but often we block off our time on our calendars and try to schedule a month in advance, and that allows everyone to sort of make the time, set it aside, and get the research done. So that's the fun part. You'll be really jazzed, and then finally you'll be like, oh my gosh, I have 20 recordings and tons of notes. Now what do I do? The goal now is to start to discover the themes and create a summary that's really consumable. You do not want to deliver a 400-page report. Your goal is to bubble this up and find the themes that are across most of the conversations that you're hearing. And this looks like chaos at first. One method we like to use is an affinity diagram. So, for example, after every interview, I'll take a few notes after the interview is done, and I'll say, here are the key takeaways that I heard. And I'll say, you know, people really love looking at projects. They love hearing about volunteers, and they love the videos. So I'll make a post-it for each of those points. And then slowly, as I do more interviews, I'll add to this. Or I'll take all the key takeaways and put them on post-its, and then I'll start to group them by topic or by theme. And what this does is it creates kind of a visual way for you to see where most of the conversation went, where the findings went, and it can be really powerful, especially if you've got all these lovely colors that you see here. Valerie, you did this recently. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you made sense of the sort of chaotic, massive amount of notes that you sometimes get at the end of research?
Sure, yeah. We had some empathy interviews that were conducted by another team within the organization, and there was a lot of feedback related to the online platform that I'm working on. And so I read through about 24 of those and pulled out everything that was related to UWO and grouped it according to themes using the Affinity Diagram. And that's been really useful in talking to people around the organization, because obviously it's not a one-person project, right? So I've been able to use that Affinity Diagram to, you know, have a summary of information, basically just one page back and front, that speaks to key points that people were bringing up about the site and key needs that the audience has. So it's a really great, easy to read tool.
That's great. And you covered 2 of the key points, is that, you know, audience research isn't done once you get the findings. You need to share these findings and summarize them for stakeholders so that you can take action, so you can make updates. maybe even change the direction that you're headed in. So you're sort of putting all of your thoughts together and identifying themes in the summarize step. And then next you have to present those findings. So this is key to outlining what you did, why you did it, who participated, the themes as well, and then identifying those next steps. So this is the part where imagine at the beginning, you have talked to your boss, you're super excited about doing interviews, and then you go off and you're doing them and they don't hear about it. You need to come back and remind them about what was driving this, why you chose this approach, and then the really juicy part about what you found in all your research. This can take many forms. Sometimes it's a report, sometimes it's a presentation. The key part is you really, really, really have to understand who you're presenting this to and what action you want them to take, because you need to craft this presentation to meet those needs so you can get the action you're looking for. Christina, Valerie, other thoughts here? We're sort of distilling it down to a really simple format here, but this is really key. This is what's going to get you to the next step, maybe to do more research, maybe to inform the design of the product. What have you two found to be really helpful or help motivate stakeholders to make decisions?
Yeah, Courtney, just this is Christina. One of the biggest takeaways, like you said, know your audience. It's obviously the topic of this talk, but knowing your stakeholders and what makes them look good and what you want them to do really tailors the whatever presentation you've got, because what you don't want to do is just go write the exhaustive document because you're really excited about it and you think everybody else should be too, because they probably will be, but you want your main points to be out there, shining, and actionable. I just can't stress that enough, because I've seen things many over the past, several places I've been, and just unactionable documents that wind up just living in a drawer somewhere, and that's the last thing we want.
Yeah, it's the so what that we're trying to answer here. When somebody gets that information,
exactly.
So what?
Yeah, and who cares?
And, I had talked earlier about keeping these types of tools and information in your pocket, and I'm going to change that now to a utility belt, just in a personal way, in being successful on the job. Just having this information and being able to pull it out when you need it is really important.
Yeah, and Valerie, you had talked about, so you've done a lot of these. You did interviews, usability testing, empathy interviews, and eventually you ended up taking these results and meeting with your IT team, right? What did that look like?
Yeah, so with the usability test, when I finally had a chance to sit down with the IT team, and actually the marketing team as well, so we have a cross collaboration going. We're using the usability test to prioritize the massive list of requests for improvements. And when you have information like themes, like what are people talking about in general, and then you have success rates that you've gotten from specific tasks in the usability testing, it really helps prioritize the work that needs to be done. And then you can also, I've been talking to the IT team about measuring success through continuing ongoing research and usability tests that we're going to be able to do in a pretty low budget way, just a few people in a room, again, soliciting people, getting enough people to do the testing. But on an ongoing basis testing, 5 people every 2 to 6 months is not, it's not impossible. And so it's good news for the team, because we can measure our progress that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. And I love also that you mentioned prioritizing your list of changes. Sometimes you can create a list like, oh, we have 60 things we have to do. But really, that is the great benefit of this audience research, is that you can identify low-hanging fruit, that are quick, small changes that get you big wins. But also, like, what's the major stuff that people are really getting hung up on? Let's focus on that. I love that you talked about that. So I have a few sort of like closing thoughts and advice. audience quotes are going to be your best friend. You should, in any theme or any point that you make, grab an audience quote from whatever method you're using. People, you would be surprised at how direct people are, and they'll be willing to share their feelings on it. And the quotes are what's going to resonate with your stakeholders or with the person that you're trying to convince to make the change. Audience quotes are going to be your best friend. Remember, even if you're a team of one, you are small but mighty. You can do this work done. As Valerie said, it's very achievable. You just got to bite off a small piece and go for it. The other thing to remember is we're not aiming for perfection here. We're not setting up scientific research where there's a two-way mirror in a lab. What we're doing is quick and dirty. It's still great. It's still useful because you're actually talking to the real audiences that are using your product. So remember, don't try to aim for perfection here. Try to get to what's good and where you're still getting decent feedback. Lastly, I can't emphasize this enough. You have to record this stuff, especially if you're one person and you may not have a partner who can take notes. Recording, getting a microphone, setting up your phone to record, it's going to be really useful so that you can go back and grab those audience quotes. We record all the sessions that we do. It's so useful. And I think that's all we have. We'll open it up to questions. Tina, have any questions come through? We're ready and willing to answer.
Okay, great. Well, for those of you who do have questions, there is on the bottom right side of the screen, you've got the chat box. So feel free to type those in there and we can address them. We do have a couple so far. Coming back to this idea, you'd mentioned you might be a team of one. One person did mention, I am the only person doing communications in my organization. So when it comes to audience research, what's the one thing or what's the starting place I should focus my time on?
Oh, that's a really great question. So you're one person, where do you start? What's the thing to focus on? As an outsider, so I'm a consultant, often coming into an organization to help support them and be a partner in the work. I'm always eager to chat with the stakeholders who are involved with the decision making. It's helpful for me to understand what motivates them. And I understand that that's not necessarily external audience research, but I want to understand the decision makers who are going to allow these changes that come later. I want to understand what motivates them. Valerie, I'm curious what your thoughts are as an in-house person.
So for me, stakeholder interviews, definitely, that was essential. But when it comes to sort of resolving the disagreements that the stakeholders have, the audience research is then the go-to, and that really carries weight for us. Ultimately, our organization wants to know what the audience's needs are. What, in the United Way network, what tools do they need to do their job better, and how do they talk about their work so that we can then communicate back to that network. So the audience research is also really key.
Great. So jump in.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. We have a next question about tools. Are there specific online tools or web tools that you would recommend for usability testing?
Yeah, I can answer this one, Christina. So the easiest answer is there are two types of kind of usability tests you can do really. If you organize it one way. One is in person, and then you can also do it remotely, which takes a lot of the logistics out of the equation. So if you're doing remote usability testing, there's a lot of tools out there that are meant specifically for it, like usertesting.com, which offers recording services, and you can set up their tests there and conduct these remote tests. But if you want, there's also much leaner ways to do this. You can use Skype and share your screen, or Google Hangouts and share your screen, or have your subject share their screen. and just if you can record those sessions if you use a tool like Zoom, for instance. But other than specific tools, some really good resources to check out. Just Nielsen Norman, nngroup.com is a really excellent thing to have in your tool belt if you're venturing into usability testing. Courtney, you got any others?
I really love the book Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. I think it's a really great starting place. It'll get you psyched up to do that testing. Valerie, were there others that were really vital to you as you were embarking on usability testing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Nielsen Norman Group, they have a report out on intranets where they've done testing of intranets globally, and after reading through that manual, that's basically how I designed my usability testing. So they're an extremely valuable resource, both the free articles that they have and the reports that you can purchase. And then I would say, like, talking to people, has been really helpful. Reading, understanding the language, because, since I was doing the usability testing basically on my own, there are some key sort of things that I missed about how to frame the work that I was doing for the organization that I've since learned by talking to people like you, Courtney, by reading more articles on NNG, like the idea of, only having to test 5 people, and the law of diminishing returns on usability testing. That's something I had to learn the hard way, but through other resources, you can learn from other people's lessons.
Great.
Okay, great. We have a question from Catherine. How do you find out what platforms your audiences are using online?
Oh, great question. So platforms can mean a number of things, because from analytics, always install analytics, Google Analytics at the most basic. You should be able to grab or get data on what device they're using, browsers. You can get location information there. So that's a good place to start, is with installing analytics and grabbing that. You can also, surveys are a great place to ask that question. And you want to back it up with analytics, but it's a very common question to ask people what kind of devices they use, or what platforms they use most often. Christina, Valerie, other ways that you've gotten to platform information?
Yeah, one a little bit, it's an ambiguous term, platform, like you said, Courtney. So if the other side of this question is like what social media platforms are they using, or what kind of other, where are they talking, that kind of thing, if that's the question, and if it's not, sorry. But
Catherine was wondering, she was thinking things like LinkedIn, Reddit versus Reddit.
So Courtney kind of nailed it with if you can start with a survey of a group of people that are representative of your audience, not asking them directly, hey, where do you have conversations about XYZ? Ask them the websites they visit every day. Usually, obviously it's going to be Facebook in a lot of cases, or New York Times, or all these other things. But then ask them the websites they visit on a weekly basis, and then the common websites they go to monthly, and obviously without overlap, because that'll cover all the grounds. It's like, okay, I go to LinkedIn maybe once a week or once a month, so you can get an idea that they might not be super active there, but they say they go to Reddit every day. That's a good sign. So that's a good start. Also, just asking people one-off in a casual way if they're representative of your audience. Hey, so yeah, what's your internet routine like? It's a weird question to ask, but it can get people thinking. It could start that conversation.
Yeah, and I would add to it, you could even ask them in the context of their smartphone use. What apps do you open every morning when you wake up? Yeah, and that's a good way to see what platforms they're on. You can also look at, sorry, I have one more thing. You can also look at referring traffic to your site. So it's a little bit more specific, because it's folks that are, bouncing from either search or social media or something like that over to your site. But it's a good place to start to see like what's actually driving traffic and what platforms are doing well.
Ooh, and one other kind of sneaky trick that's not perfect, but it can definitely be a nice springboard, is if you've already got your hypotheses about these audiences. Let's say, let's go with the millennial. I hate millennial thing, but let's just go with it again, 18 to 22-year-old males. If you've already started working through your hypotheses, ask a question and Google it that they might ask in Google, and just see what shows up is like, okay, here's like 10 Reddit threads. Oh my gosh, okay, I need to go there. Or, oh, look, it's on Quora. Wow, there's a ton of conversations there. So that's another kind of sneaky way in.
I love that.
Okay, we've got a question from Lucy. She's wondering, is embedding survey questions into a website a valid delivery method for audiences that feel burnt out from surveys?
Great question. I laugh because I've definitely suggested doing a survey and people are like, no, we do too many surveys. They have fatigue, which is a real thing. You can totally fatigue your audiences with too much. Yeah, I think it's great. The surveys on websites that I love are the ones that are 1 or 2 questions. So you're not going to do a 15-question survey on a website. And it's helpful if it relates to the page where it's popping up. So often what I like to do or recommend is on deeper pages when they're on maybe they're on a report page or program page, something much deeper in the site, not the home page, and ask the question, were you able to find what you need? What would you change? Keep it really simple, and also give it, if you can, make sure it's multiple choice, because people are much more likely to click an answer than to type something out on their keyboard. It's valuable. You're gonna get different information. It'd be kind of weird to put a survey on your site on the page where it's like, what is your device usage? Because it's totally out of the realm of what they're thinking when they're navigating on that page. Christina or Valerie, any thoughts or experiences with surveys on the website itself?
No, we haven't done that yet.
One thing that is useful that I would add is it's a great way to solicit participants in audience research by putting a call to action on the site itself and say, hey, we're going to do some research. We'd love your opinion. Will you help us out? And then they just enter their email address. That's another great, easy, passive way to recruit.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. We'll see if we can fit them in the next 3 minutes. A quick one, hopefully, from Ramya. She's wondering, wondering if you know any good tools to take notes and synthesize information from the interviews.
Ooh, good question. Valerie, what do you use to take notes?
Oh my gosh, so this is going to be like a lesson learned, like a do not do. So my first time around with stakeholder interviews, I used Excel, and I had multiple tabs, and it was really difficult to go back. I lost some tabs in saving some valuable interviews. So Courtney's note to record it really rings very valuable and true. And then, so from there, I just tabulated it into tables, moved the data into tables and found themes that way, and then back to Excel. So I don't have a tried and true tool, actually.
Yeah, lessons learned are also really good here. I've tried to take notes in Excel, and it seems like a good idea, but I've had the same problems, Valerie. It does not work. I often take notes in just an area where there's like open text. So whether it's a Google Doc or, notes. And then the key thing is at the end, take 2 minutes and bullet point a few takeaways or highlight a few quotes that were really useful, because you'll have to go back to that document. And so better to have those bullet points and then decide whether or not you want to read the 4 pages of notes you frantically took.
Okay, great. We got one last minute, so we're going to take one last question. Unfortunately, can't get them all in, but we've got, maybe we'll put the information back up to get your emails and Twitter handles if people want to ask you directly. But last one from Melissa, if we can at least get a few notes in here. Can you talk a bit about how to clearly define and distill the goals of your research? And within that, how to get everyone on board, especially if you've got stakeholders who have different goals? It's probably harder to get into 1 minute, but maybe a few ideas.
That's a juicy one. Oh man, I need like 10 minutes for that. So I think that I had some questions here. Let me see if I can go to this slide that has some guiding questions. This has to do with getting buy-in and setting goals. A big thing is, are you working from assumptions or facts? When was the last time you did that research? So part of the goal could be like, we have not talked to people in over 2 years. That's problematic. Technology is advancing so rapidly that you need to constantly understand what platforms, tools, sites people are using to get their work done and how you fit into that ecosystem. And then this question at the end, if you conduct the research, what will that do for your organization or for your project? Think really hard about that. That's going to help you identify some goals. Christina, I'm wondering if you have other thoughts here.
I have a lot of thoughts, but just being conscious too that it is right on the 11 mark. But really quickly, as Courtney touched on earlier, just really getting to, if you have to have one-on-one meetings with folks, do it. And if you've got the time and if you can actually get their time, because if you can tailor your message to your audience, obviously you're going to be a lot more effective.
Yeah, and I think Valerie's advice too, and what she did around interviewing stakeholders, I can't emphasize how valuable that is, because you're going to, by asking the question, what are your goals for this project and how can I help support them? Conveying that you're a team player in it and that you care about helping them move their mission forward is going to be really key in persuading those folks later. So building that rapport early on is also going to help them, circle around a set of shared goals. Great question, though. That's a tough one.
Okay, well, thanks for addressing it, guys, and addressing all of those questions and getting us through this hour. It's been, I think, really helpful. You've got the contact information there. You will be receiving a recording of today's webinar in the next couple of days, so don't worry about having missed maybe some things. You'll be able to digest those again soon. So with that, we'll say farewell and wish you a nice rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, folks.